And there are millions of Americans, cops, waitresses, nurses, you name it, going to work today to do their job, and we're going to work in the Senate to do our job. And one of the most important jobs the Senate Judiciary Committee will ever do is have hearings and confirm a justice to the Supreme Court. So for housekeeping purposes, the first day has traditionally been opening statements by my colleagues. We'll do 10-minute rounds, and everybody will have 10 minutes to talk about their views of the hearing and what this is all about. Then we will have a panel to introduce Judge Barrett, and she will make an opening statement. We'll try to finish mid-afternoon if that's possible. Then Tuesday and Wednesday will be long days. There'll be 30-minute rounds for every senator, followed by a 20-minute round. My goal is to complete that Wednesday at some kind of reasonable hour in the evening. Thursday, we will begin the markup. I intend to hold it over and bring the committee back on the 22nd to vote on the nomination. So if I may, I'll start off with an opening statement and say, why are we here? Number one, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died on September the 18th. What can you say about Justice Ginsburg? She was confirmed 96-3. Now, those were days that have since passed. I regret that. 96-3. Now, this was a person who worked for the ACLU, someone who was known in progressive circles as an icon. Apparently, just about every Republican voted for her. Her good friend on the court, Justice Scalia, I think got 97 votes. I don't know what happened between then and now. I guess we can all take some blame, but I just want to remind everybody there was a time in this country where someone like Ruth Bader Ginsburg was seen by almost everybody as qualified for the position of being on the Supreme Court, understanding that she would have a different philosophy than many of the Republicans who voted for her. 27 years on the court. Before becoming a member of the court, she was an active litigator, pushing for more equal justice and better rights for women throughout the country. Her close friend, until his death, Justice Scalia called her the leading and very successful litigator on behalf of women's rights, the Thurgood Marshall of that cause. What high praise. I can't say any more than that statement says. In my view, the person appearing before this committee is in a category of excellence, something the country should be proud of, and she will have a chance to make her case to be a worthy successor and to become the 9th member of the Supreme Court of the United States. On September the 26th, Judge Amy Barrett was nominated by President Trump to the Supreme Court. Who is she? She is a judge sitting on the 7th Judicial Circuit. She's highly respected. She was a professor at Notre Dame. 3 years during that tenure, she was chosen by the students to being the best professor, which I'm sure is no easy task at any college. She's widely admired for her integrity. She grew up in New Orleans, graduated from Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee in 1994, graduated summa cum laude and first in her class from Notre Dame Law School in 1997. So academically, she's very gifted. She clerked for Judge Lawrence Silberman on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, and then for Justice Scalia on the Supreme Court. She practiced law in Washington, D.C. She joined the faculty at Notre Dame in 2002. She's published numerous articles in prestigious journals, including the Columbia, University of Virginia, and Cornell Law Review. She's been a circuit court judge at the 7th Circuit since 2017. She was confirmed to that position with a bipartisan vote. She has heard hundreds of cases in that capacity. She said, "I clerked for Justice Scalia more than 20 years ago, but the lessons I learned still resonate. His judicial philosophy is mine. A judge must apply the law as written. Judges are not policymakers, and they must be resolute in setting aside any policy views they might hold." She will give her statement, but I think that is a good summary of who she is. That's who Amy Barrett is in terms of the law. In terms of Amy Barrett, the individual, she and her husband have 7 children, 2 adopted. So 9 seems to be a good number. The process. This is an election year. We're confirming the judge in an election year after the voting has occurred. What will happen is that my Democratic colleagues will say, this has never been done, and they're right in this regard. Nobody's, I think, has ever been confirmed in an election year past July. The bottom line is Justice Ginsburg, when asked about this several years ago, said that a president serves for 4 years, not 3. There's nothing unconstitutional about this process. This is a vacancy that's occurred through a tragic loss of a great woman, and we're going to fill that vacancy with another great woman. The bottom line here is that the Senate is doing its duty constitutionally. As to Judge Garland, the opening that occurred with the passing of Justice Scalia was in the early part of an election year. The primary process had just started. And we can talk about history, but here's the history as I understand it. There's never been a situation where you had a president of one party and the Senate of another, where the nominee, the replacement, was made in an election year. It's been over 140 years ago. I think there have been 19 vacancies filled in an election year. 17 of the 19 were confirmed to the court when the party of the president and the Senate were the same. In terms of timing, the hearing is starting 16 days after a nomination. More than half of all Supreme Court hearings have been held within 16 days of the announcement of the nominee. Stevens 10, Rehnquist 13, Powell 13, Blackmun 15, Berger 13. All I can say is that I feel that we're doing this constitutionally, that our Democratic friends object to the process. I respect them all. They'll have a chance to have their say. But most importantly, I hope we will know more about how the law works, checks and balances, what the Supreme Court is all about when this hearing is over. Why hold this hearing? A lot of people on our side say just ram it through. I hear that a lot. That's why I don't listen to the radio much anymore. So the bottom line is I think it's important. This is a lifetime appointment. I would like the world and the country to know more about Judge Barrett. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you've accomplished. I think you're a great choice by the president. This is probably not about persuading each other unless something really dramatic happens. All Republicans will vote yes and all Democrats will vote no. And that will be the way the breakout of the vote. But the hearing is a chance for Democrats to dig deep into her philosophy, appropriately ask her about the law, how she would be different, what's on her mind. It gives Republicans a chance to do the same thing. Most importantly, it gives you a chance, the American people, to find out about Judge Barrett. Judge for yourself. Is this person qualified? Is she as qualified as Sotomayor and Kagan? I think so. These were 2 nominees presented to the committee by President Obama. They had a different legal philosophy than my own, but I never doubted one moment that they were not qualified. I thought Gorsuch and Kavanaugh were qualified. The Senate in the past has looked at qualifications more than anything else. We've taken a different path at times. Bork, Thomas, Alito, Kavanaugh. I hope we don't take that path with Judge Barrett. She doesn't deserve that. I don't think it makes this hearing any better. And the American people, I believe, would not deserve a repeat of those episodes and the Senate Judiciary Committee's history. To my Democratic colleagues, I respect you all. We've done some things together and we've had some fights in this committee. I've tried to give you the time you need to make your case, and you have every right in the world to make your case. I think I know how the vote's going to come out, but I think Judge Barrett is required for the good of the nation to submit to your questions and ours. This is going to be a long, contentious week. I would just ask one thing of the committee. To the extent possible, let's make it respectful. Let's make it challenging. Let's remember the world is watching. Senator Feinstein.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. And I do want to just address your last statements. We feel the same way, and I believe we want this to be a very good hearing, and I certainly will strive to do my best to achieve that. Good morning, Judge Barrett, and welcome to you and your family. Less than 1 month ago, the nation lost one of our leading voices for equality. Ruth Bader Ginsburg left very big shoes to fill. Judge Ginsburg loved the law, and she loved this country. She worked all of her life to ensure that the opening words of our Constitution, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union," included all the people, not just a few, elite few. She was a standard bearer for justice. Justice Ginsburg's nomination was the first one that I participated in when I came to the Senate, and it was a real thrill to be part of that crowded and celebratory hearing for someone who had broken down barriers and reopened doors and staunchly believed in a woman's right to full equality and autonomy. In filling Judge Ginsburg's seat, the stakes are extraordinarily high for the American people, both in the short term and for decades to come. Most importantly, health care coverage for millions of Americans is at stake with this nomination. So over the course of these hearings, my colleagues and I will focus on that subject. We will examine the consequences if, and that's a big if, Republicans succeed in rushing this nomination through the Senate before the next president takes office. But most importantly, in just a few weeks, on November 10th, the Supreme Court will hear hearings in Texas v. California, a case brought to strike down the ACA. The president has promised to appoint justices who will vote to dismantle that law. As a candidate, he criticized the Supreme Court for upholding the law and said, and I quote, "If I win the presidency, my judicial appointments will do the right thing, unlike Bush's appointee, John Roberts, on Obamacare," end quote. And when he appointed Judge Barrett to fill Justice Ginsburg's seat, the president said that eliminating the Affordable Care Act would be, quote, "a big win for the USA." Judge Barrett, you've been critical of Chief Justice Roberts for his 5-4 opinion upholding the law, stating that Roberts, quote, "pushed the Affordable Care Act beyond its plausible meaning to save the statute," end quote. This well could mean that if Judge Barrett is confirmed, Americans stand to lose the benefits that the ACA provides. So I hope you will clarify that in this hearing. First, more than 130 million Americans with pre-existing conditions like cancer, asthma, or even COVID-19 could be denied coverage or charged more to obtain health insurance. This includes more than 16.8 million Californians with pre-existing conditions. And we are just one state, but I think you should know how we feel. Secondly, some 12 million working Americans are covered through the ACA's Medicaid expansion. If the act is struck down, they lose their health care. Third, more than 2 million Americans under the age of 26 are covered by their parents' health insurance, and they could lose that coverage. Fourth, insurers could charge higher premiums for women simply because of their gender. And fifth, women could lose access to critical preventive services and maternity care, including cancer screenings and well-woman visits. Now, the bottom line is this. There have been 70 attempts to repeal the ACA, but clearly the effort to dismantle the law continues, and they are asking the Supreme Court to strike down the Affordable Care Act. This, I believe, will cause tremendous harm. Consider people like Christina Monroe Garcia of my home state. At age 60, Christina's eyesight started to fail because of cataracts. She had always struggled to obtain insurance because of pre-existing conditions, including C-sections and epilepsy. The cost of coverage, when it was even offered to her, averaged between $2,500 and $3,000 a month, far more than she and her husband could afford. In 2010, she was able to obtain coverage through the Affordable Care Act. Within weeks, she was able to have cataract surgery. This saved her life. Christina described her reaction when she was able to get coverage through the California Health Exchange following passage of the ACA. And let me quote, "It was like manna from heaven. I cried. After all these years of struggling to obtain coverage, I was able to get insurance through the California Exchange, no questions asked about my pre-existing conditions. The premium was worth $200 a month as compared to the $2,500 to $3,000 monthly payments I would have to pay before the ACA if I could even get an insurer to offer me coverage." As Christina further explained, and I quote, "People just don't understand what it was like, the incredible fear before the Affordable Care Act, having to worry about being able to cover medical expenses and not being able to find affordable insurance," end quote. We can't afford to go back to those days when Americans could be denied coverage or charged exorbitant amounts. That's what's at stake for many of us, for America, with this nomination. And that's why the questions we will ask and the views, hopefully, that you will share with us are so important. We are now just 22 days from the election, Mr. Chairman. Voting is underway in 40 states. Senate Republicans are pressing forward, full speed ahead, to consolidate a court that will carry their policies forward with, I hope, some review for the will of the American people. President Trump said last week that he had, quote, "instructed my representatives to stop negotiation over a COVID-19 relief package until after the election," end quote, and to, quote, "focus full-time on confirming Judge Barrett to the Supreme Court." When Justice Scalia died in February of 2016, Senate Republicans refused to consider a replacement for his seat until after the election. At the time, Senator McConnell said, "The American people should have a voice in the selection of their next Supreme Court justice." When asked in October 2018 if Republicans intended to honor their own rule if an opening were to come up in 2020, Chairman Graham promised, quote, "If an opening comes in the last year of President Trump's term and the primary process has started, we'll wait till after the next election." Republicans should honor this word for their promise and let the American people be heard. Simply put, I believe we should not be moving forward on this nomination, not until the election has ended and the next president has taken office. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Feinstein. Senator Grassley.
Welcome, Judge. On March 1, 2016, Justice Ginsburg delivered a eulogy for her friend, Justice Scalia. Justice Ginsburg said, quote, "We were different, yes, in our interpretation of written text, yet one in our reverence for the courts and its place in the U.S. system of governance," end of quote. Justice Ginsburg's remarkable life and legacy will be honored for a generation, and also Justice Scalia's. The Senate is now tasked with carrying out perhaps its most solemn duty under the Constitution. As we go through this process, we should heed Justice Ginsburg's words with a shared reverence for the court and its place in our constitutional system. This idea of place in our system of government is critical. Ours is a government of separated powers. The power to make, enforce, and interpret law isn't centralized in one person or one branch of government. That's not a mistake. You all know what our American Revolution was all about and what the Constitution is all about, because people at that time were sick and tired of one person, George III, restricting American colonies of freedom that English-speaking people elsewhere exercised. As Justice Scalia reminds us, the framers recognized the separation of powers as, quote, "the absolutely central guarantee of a just government, because without a secure structure of separated powers, our Bill of Rights would be worthless," end of quote. But this constitutional system only succeeds if each branch respects its proper role. A good judge understands it's not the court's place to rewrite the law as it sees fit. It's not his or her place to let policy, personal, or moral principles dictate an outcome of a case. We are fortunate. Judge Barrett's record clearly reflects this standard. She said, quote, "A judge must apply the law as written. Judges are not policymakers, and they must be resolute in setting aside any policy views that they might hold," end of quote. Judge Barrett's service reflects an exceptional intellect paired with deep commitment to the rule of law. So we look to those who know her well. She's received praise across the legal profession and ideological spectrum. Former colleagues at Notre Dame described the judge as, quote, "brilliant, industrious, gracious, and kind, and as a person of utmost integrity with an open mind and an even temperament that is prized in a judge," end of quote. She's also known as, quote, "a generous mentor," and she's known for her, quote, "her humility, graciousness, and her ability, born of her credibility, to build consensus among differing views, end of quote. Her students, quote, expressed awe with the power of Judge Barrett's intellect, with her mastery and organization of complex material, and with her professionalism, end of quote. Leaders of more than 200 liberty-supporting groups across the country say Judge Barrett, quote, possesses the judicial temperament and philosophy necessary as a bulwark for our Constitution and institutions of government, end of quote. 24 state governors describe Judge Barrett as, quote, a woman of great moral character who is devoted to her country, community, family, and faith like many Americans, end of quote. The Wall Street Journal editorial board says, quote, President Trump's nomination of Coney Barrett for the Supreme Court is the highlight of his presidency, end of quote. A promise kept, a promise made, a promise kept. Liberal Harvard law professor Noah Feldman called Judge Barrett, quote, a principled, brilliant lawyer, a genuine and good person, highly qualified to serve on the Supreme Court. That's a pretty high praise. I just recited from others. Moreover, Judge Barrett is a tireless mother of 7. For decades, I've led efforts in the Senate to improve foster care and promote adoption. So it's a privilege for me to welcome a justice like that to the Supreme Court. To sum up, Judge Barrett's qualifications and character are impeccable. Unfortunately, I expect the minority will try to rustle up baseless claims and scare tactics as they've done for decades. Anything to derail the confirmation of a Republican nominee. Lately, the left is threatening to pack the Supreme Court in retaliation for this confirmation process. Even the Democrats' nominee for president and vice president have not ruled out such